Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Start Small, Think Big podcast brought to you by Digital Meld. My name is Brad Groux, founder and CEO of Digital Meld.
I'm Erich Archer, a television producer now immersed in AI video production.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, for joining us. We're taking kind of a different approach this week. We generally think B2B, but there is some B2B in the discussion we're going to be having, but video production isn't necessarily something we think from day-to-day business operations, right? We think it from a marketing perspective and those things. But I think this is just such an interesting time for the video production with AI. We're kind of seeing these deep fakes going on and all kinds of crazy stuff with the latest releases, like Google's latest VO product. So I think we're just going to dive into the news and kind of actually, before we dive into news, why don't we just give Eric a chance to introduce himself and tell us about his company, his background, and what he's passionate about.
Sure, thanks. I've been in the TV industry for over 20 years now. I got a film studies degree in school and then moved to New York promptly after that to get into sports and music and reality television. And then I moved out to Los Angeles to get into bigger studio production and did some stuff for Fox and NBC and some ad agencies and things like that. And then moved back home to Massachusetts, where I'm from. And for the last 12 years, I've been running a nonprofit local community television station, and all the while freelancing. And the last couple of years, just gotten very obsessed with Gen AI, video production, all the new tools, and been doing that more and more.
Well, imagine since it's, you're working for a nonprofit. I'm a big fan of like PBS. PBS NewsHour is the only news I watch, and I tell people all the time, don't watch all the other talking heads and stuff. Just watch PBS NewsHour. They stream it live on YouTube every night for free. I imagine like these tools are, you're working on shoestring budgets. These tools are really, really important.
That was a big reason of why I got into it, is because they represented such resource gains for us. Being a small nonprofit, it was like, oh, these LLMs can help us write faster, plan faster, apply to things more, that kind of thing. And then there's automations that can help us do things faster, more efficiently. And then, here comes all these Gen AI tools, and we're in the image business. And so obviously this stuff applies to us too. That being said, I think I'm having a harder time finding some of the use cases in the public TV space, because that production is very like nuts and bolts, very live event, very authentic. There's only so many ways to find it, to get Gen AI in the mix there, although there are some in growing cases. But certainly, for the bigger companies with bigger brands or bigger marketing budgets, or just, stories to tell, it's an exciting new space to be in for sure. There's all kinds of use cases everywhere.
Awesome. Yeah, we generally have like a short news segment where we talk about some news stories, but I think there's a lot of like overlap between these news stories that I want to talk about, like Google's VO3, there's some deep fake concerns. OpenAI's AI Sora tool, video tool, is like shown that it exhibits biases, and then just generative AI deep fakes in general, especially with the world context going on right now, all the crazy stuff going around the world, it's getting really harder and harder for people to trust what they see, right? Like we tell people all the time with AI, you always trust but verify, have that human in the loop. And we have to think that there's going to be bad actors in there, but how do you find that balance, from this perspective? How do you, I guess, approach adopting these new tools as they come out to make sure you're doing your due diligence from an ethics perspective, especially whenever you're doing something like public broadcasting that is going to come off of donations and stuff, which you could be held accountable for?
Yeah, well, to be clear, most of the AI work that I'm doing is sort of on my own outside of my nonprofit television role, where I have a lot more room to just experiment with this stuff and, work with clients who want to try different things. So I'm finding more use cases in more traditional production spaces than in the nonprofit sector. That being said, to try to answer your question, certainly keeping an eye on the legal challenges going on, like with Disney and Midjourney, to understand the values of the platforms I'm using. But, on my end, I'm working on a project basis, as always. I have a project in front of me that I have to complete, and that project can be done so many different ways. And I have to source a bunch of assets to tell a visual story. And there are newer ways to steal IP and do deep fakes and things like that. I think it's on the individual creators primarily to focus on their outputs and to make sure that they're not too derivative of other work to the point that that work is recognizable. But I show people in my demos all the time the sources that I've stolen to bring in as reference for my imagery. But then I also demonstrate how by the end, what I have is so far from what I started with, I'm making the case that this is a fair use of this stolen material. It's much more of a reference in the same old creative reference way we've always referenced other work. You know, if you've read a novel that week, you might be thinking about it when you're doing your creative work. If you've seen a film, that kind of thing. So you just have to make sure that you're moving far enough away to make a unique creative work at
No,
the end. And also just being super transparent about all the AI tools that you're using. You know, if you're saying, I use this one, this one, this one, this one, and here's how, no problem. You know what I mean? I think it's when you start to be shady about it and hide it and do those sorts of things that, there's certainly a lot easier ways now than ever to make deep fakes and all kinds of stuff like that.
No, you make great points, and I think transformative is the main basis of fair use. For those who don't know, fair use is covered by the First Amendment for the United States, and so it's the reason there's like React YouTubers and Twitch people, like they watch something content and then they're pausing and giving their reactions in real time. That's transformative. Someone can argue whether that's actually transformative, but it truly is. I mean, the case study is there. I really don't see, artists have been finding inspiration, and creatives have been finding inspiration since the dawn of time, right? Like someone built something or made something that you found beautiful and that inspired you to go create your own. I think that's great. I think training those models is ethical. I think the big thing is transparency. We're real open and honest about everything we do. We have nothing to hide. And I think as long as you're doing that and you're doing things the right way and you're not trying to pass off I think the big thing is trying to pass off AI as like completely human generated, I think is where that kind of goes. So it's good to know that there are folks like yourself out there kind of fighting that good fight and then understanding, because the key of this is I always say technology a great equalizer, and AI studios. So at the AWS Summit Singapore, for the people who don't know, AWS is Amazon's cloud service, and Amazon owns Amazon Prime Video, and I think MGM, right, or several major creative studios that are making Hollywood full budget pictures and television shows, and they've spent billions of dollars in Hollywood, and so this is something they're looking to use. But they just highlighted how cloud-based AI building blocks are enabling businesses to scale video automation and creative workflows. And how many of you listening have been and you're in B2B marketing or B2B consulting and you've had to go hire a full team of folks or get some interns to come shoot some film for you or build some creative documentation and things? You can use these tools to expand that footprint. And what we like to say is you punch above your weight class, right? You're a welterweight punching up to the heavyweights of the enterprises of the world. And can you just talk about how you can see this help democratizing it from that B2B like creation process?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty exciting part of it, because I think, well, there's a good example recently in the news of like a local dentist office that grabbed VO3 and jumped on a viral trend of these like Yeti influencers and like 100x his like viewership for the month or like something insane. You know, I think it's a combination of like these tools being available and the social media algorithms the way they are today, allowing things to cut through if they're good enough. And there's so many creative people out there, right? And so from the individual creator like myself or you on up to small businesses like this dentist office, we can now start to make things that are like cinematic and awesome in a way that was impossible before. Mainly cost impossible, but also creative. Like, you know, with a little bit of help from Midjourney, you're making stuff way better than you ever could before with the camera, so it's leveling. And then the writing's going to level you up with ChatGPT, or ChatGPT will level up your writing and so many different things. And like all of a sudden, anyone can compete. I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned I had to move to New York. I had to move to LA because that's what you used to have to do. You do not have to do that anymore. And you need way less permission and access than you used to when I was coming up. You had to have that proximity. You had to have the network, the schooling, all that stuff. And you just don't anymore. You could be anywhere in the world with some software and a computer, and really compete. So I think that's super exciting. And certainly for like the businesses out there, I see Game of Thrones coming from Walmart. I see like Amazon, Amazon already does that, but like lots of smaller brands putting out really incredible original content, incredible cinematic original content at like the small business level.
Yeah. And
Crazy. stuff,
And I like to think of it from the team building perspective, because how many times, like, especially for Fortune 500 companies and publicly traded companies who have a lot of compliance things that go Sarbanes Oxley and stuff, like there's the ethics training that, like, annual ethics training that users have to go through, the sexual harassment training, all these other sort of, and it's just like such a drab experience where you can like come together and create like a team and like internal learning and development team within your organization, say, hey, let's come together and create some like engaging and dynamic content for this. And it's just internal to your little bubble, but maybe it does get viral and you can do things and expand across that. I just, once you get the creative juices flowing in people's head, I think there's going to have a better time at work. Like they're not sitting in a cubicle, like regretting their life choices, so letting folks use these tools to be creative. And I tell people all the time, like, I've been doing podcasts for many years, and I'd get through 10 or 15 episodes, and then I would just burn out. Right. And the beauty of these tools is they help me not burn out. So again, like Eric and I had a conversation, I think it was last week. I recorded it. Microsoft Copilot recorded that conversation. After that conversation, I fed that transcript into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT knows the basics. It provided me a basic like structure of what our podcast would look like, and that gave us the talking points for this podcast. And something would normally take me 4, 6, 8 hours of research to understand more about Eric and everything he's doing and planning this podcast and to get great content. I'm able to cut that down to an hour or two at most. I'm still a little obsessive, so some people would probably do it quicker than that. Just think that for any creative process, not, you're creating business process documentation, or you're creating just anything, like use these tools to free up your time to do the stuff that's really mattered. To me, what's really meaningful is this actual conversation. The planning of the conversation is not as meaningful, and so I think that's our goal, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was just talking to someone earlier today about a sort of a wordsmithing exercise that we were going to have over a mission statement. And I was just joking with him about how much time I've spent wordsmithing things over the years that I don't spend anymore because ChatGPT helps speed that up. Like the point is the intent of the conversation, not the arrangement of the words. But if it's an external facing document, the arrangement of the words has to be great. It has to be perfect, and God forbid you're doing that with a committee. You're going to spend a whole lot of time doing that kind of thing, or putting a pitch deck together, or some of these things that, you just obsess over. Like ChatGPT can just, spin that wheel so much faster for you.
So, doing some research with you and understanding what you've done, you've built over 100 custom GPTs, I imagine, for part of this creative process. So I guess, can you walk us through what you're utilizing those GPT for, or like how focused you can be or how broad they can be? And then like how folks who are creative, who have a book idea, who have a short film idea, and it's been in the back burner. I have a OneNote full of ideas from 20 years ago. I was like, now I would love to get started with those things. How could just people, again, start small, think big, how could they get started on that journey?
I just love the idea of everyone dusting off all those idea books,
Yeah.
I just think that's cool.
So awesome.
I have a lot of those too, and I think it's time to do that. I think it's time to take out those old books with your idea fragments in there and see if any are worth exploring. Yeah, I mean, the GPTs started out as sort of like prompt storage for me, where it was, I don't know how to code, and AI came along, and I was like really wanting to take advantage of some of the automation, and the GPTs were interesting because it seemed like, okay, if I have a repetitive process here that is like a text-oriented process, I can make a GPT that sort of, if you don't know what they are, they're like wrappers around on ChatGPT that you can make yourself. And so it's just like within ChatGPT, you can say, I just want you to operate this way, which is very much like a good prompt. Here's your role, here's what I'm going to give you as an input. Here's the process I want you to undertake with that input. Here's the output I want back. Here's whatever extra rules. And it's like, cool. So now if I have like my monthly report to my board of directors that I have to write, follows a template. Every month the subject matter changes, but the template is the same. I could make a GPT trained on some successful reports to just take in spoken information about the month or raw information about the month and just put it into the template. Cool. All right. Well, one of the other things I do all the time is like try to convert normal text into an image prompt. I'm trying to make professional level imagery. So it's pretty sophisticated level prompting for Midjourney or for Runway or some of these platforms that are all sort of specific. They have these little code things that, are specific to the platform. And so you can make a GPT that just knows all that stuff. So you can just put your lazy prompt in there and, you get your Mid-Journey prompt back. So like stuff like that started to become like, oh, I could just make a GPT for that. And they're super easy to make. And so I started to make a whole bunch for myself for different little things like that. And then I realized that there were a lot of business decision-making frameworks that I had paid consultants to perform for me about my business because I didn't know at the time how to do them, or I didn't know I was smart enough to do them or whatever. I was a first-time manager and like, what's a SWOT analysis? Well, ChatGPT knows full well what a SWOT analysis is and how to conduct one. And so I figured, okay, if I just explain to a GPT that it is a SWOT analysis GPT and that all I'm going to do is be a new user and I'm going to come to it and say, hey, let's perform this analysis. And then you, the SWOT analysis GPT, just ask me the necessary questions, strengths, weaknesses, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Ask me about them and then perform the analysis, like draw the information out of me that you need to conduct it and then conduct it. And so I made a whole bunch of those because there's all these known business frameworks, very established, and I can just make these little wrappers that work for anyone to have this little Q&A with this little thing and have this consulting session performed for you. So I called it Smarty Pants, and I made like 150 of those that just are these like decision-making frameworks you might spend $2,000 with a consultant on, and you can knock them out in a few minutes.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's so folks that don't understand, like basically when you have this wrapper or workspace and ChatGPT, their workspaces, we have like example, we have one for each one of our customers. I have one for the podcast. I have one for our legal documentations. Like you were saying, you add context. That's you tell it like, hey, you're going to be a legal specialist. And here's one of we've uploaded our previously written contracts that we paid our lawyers $600 an hour to write. And once we know that basic framework of what a statement of work or SOW is, we don't need to pay our lawyers $600 an hour to write all subsequent SOWs. And just think about, like you're saying, the SWOT analysis stuff, generating things for like quarterly reviews for your employees, like all that kind of stuff. Once you have that base documentation, and the beauty is like most of these, if you're in an enterprise, especially, you probably have a documented process as part of your Sarbanes-Oxley or HIPAA compliance or those sorts of things. Just feed those contextual documents in and said, this is our format of doing things. And then you just get those things back. So it's fantastic that that's what you did. And again, this is where those solopreneurs and small businesses can punch above their weight class because you don't have to do all of these menial tasks and bring in team members from all over the place to do this stuff. That's, like you said, most of the time it's repetitive. It's like it's the same sort of format. You're just changing the meat and potatoes a little bit. So that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fascinating to me that 2 years ago I couldn't make a single tool, and now I can make a couple hundred and put them online easily and have people buying them all in short order. It's a fascinating thing, and they're truly useful, and I can just keep adding to the whole mix of them. So
Yeah, and the beauty is as we use these tools, we're going to have more and more ideas that we didn't even think of, and like I gave a presentation last week and I talked about the AlphaGo, which Google DeepMind created as a chess-like game, the Chinese chess kind of. And like in 2016, this AI came up with an idea, Move 37, that nobody had ever heard of before or thought of before. And like these bots and ChatGPTs and stuff, they're going to come up with stuff and new use cases that we never thought of. And that's why I'm not so doom and gloom. Like, yeah, you're going to need to adapt and learn. But I think for the most part, as long as there's this human, there's human plus AI. As long as you add that plus AI, I think you're going to come out okay. And like you said, just start with those small things and kind of hone in on that context that's important to you.
yeah, exactly. Whatever you're focused on, whatever you're working on is where you should start. Just how can AI help me with that?
Yeah. So that also gets us to the next area we want to cover, especially in the creative space, especially whenever there's like unions involved in Hollywood and things, and the use of, I think James Earl Jones is the perfect example. For those who don't know, James Earl Jones, actor, he passed away recently, but before he passed away, he signed away the rights to his voice and likeness to be used with AI. I mean, I think he was the first major star to do that. He's the voice of Darth Vader. So like to me, as a space geek, that's like one of the coolest voices in all of human history, right? And so like his voice has been used by creatives and AI since. How do you approach that subject and basically the taboo of using it, right? Because there's taboo in the business world, like, oh my God, he used ChatGPT. Is that cheating? It was like, but like you said, like, no, you're focusing on the points that really matter. You're not focusing on, the minutia of it. Like, so how do you, what's that fine balance as a creative to, not just immediately get turned off, like people turn off to you because, oh, you use AI, I don't want anything to do with you.
Very open to those feelings that people have and that negative sentiment. I mean, having spent my entire career in an industry that is sort of piece by piece getting run over, like I could completely understand this negative sentiment. Graphic designers, voiceover artists, camera operators. I'm seeing real existential crisis on the face of a lot of friends of mine that love shooting video. And here I come like, oh, look at this great AI video stuff. So I just try to be empathetic. Like, I'm really glad that I enjoy doing the work with AI. Like, I think a lot of people just aren't that into it. Like, they don't geek out on it the way that I luckily do. You know, I found a real comfortable transfer of my love of video production into AI production. Like, it just, for whatever reason, I like it. A lot of people really like cameras on set with lighting and people, and like that's all. They don't like the other way. And so I understand that. I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, you have it wrong. Like, that's a that's a sad, tragic thing to look at a director of photography who looks depressed that his career might be winding down. That sucks. I know a lot of those people. So they have every right to say, AI is the devil. I just don't really feel that way. I've always felt excited. The first time I saw this stuff, I couldn't wait to get my hands on it to use, to tell visual stories like I've always loved doing since I was getting a degree for this type of work. Like, I've just always loved this. And here comes this technology that makes it easier for me to do it in a more powerful way, maybe make more money from, I have 4 little kids. It's hard for me to go out on set now and make money doing it the old way. I got a bad back. I don't want to carry heavy gear around anymore. Like, I'm very happy to do it at 9 o'clock at night when they go to bed from my couch for a company on the other side of the world. To me, that's super exciting. So I just try to balance it with like, these fears are justified and I share a lot of them, but I can't help that I'm also loving it, what I'm able to do with it. I feel like it's unlocked creative inspiration in me that hasn't been there since film school. Like, I just love it again. It's like, I can't deny that. So I think when people see that, they go, okay, it can be both things, it can be both, you know what I mean? If they're reasonable.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of had this conversation on previous episodes, and I think there's always going to be that boutique aspect of it, right? There's going to be people that love the handmade things. As we saw the rise of that in COVID, right? People starting up leather shops in their garage, and like because the Sheen world and the Temu world, like people that throwaway culture. There's people like one of the subreddits I'm on is buy it for life. Like, I just love it. Like, these leather made goods that just last forever or whatever. I think there's always going to be, you're going to have the Christopher Nolans of the world that I'm going to shoot on film. I'm never going to use digital. And there's been that fight for 30 years, and like, right, but digital versus, especially the move over from HD with television production and stuff. I think this is just another one of those tools. And I think the big thing, I think that the best stories are going to rise to the top. That's what I love. I love technology because it's a great equalizer. It's the democratization of power. The iPhone, look how many people's careers were kicked off because they had an iPhone where they could just go record and do really, really cool things. There's people who are directing full feature films and have used iPhones in feature films. And like the fact that like a 16-year-old kid with an idea doesn't need a hope and a dream anymore. They just need to go make it. And I really love that fact. I understand too. You have to be empathetic of the people that are worried that the future is coming for them. But the good news is we have time to adapt to that. And it's just, you have to upskill. Like I gotta say it all the time, gone are the days of getting a college degree and having the same job for 40 years at the same company and retiring peacefully. Now we're in a constant lifelong learning lifetime now. That's just the way the world works. And it's because it just moves so fast. But the beauty is you can use these tools to help upskill you, to help get you where you need to be. You can find people like Eric to help, guide you along that journey. So don't be afraid. I think just embrace it, because I think we're going to get far more great untold stories than we ever would have imagined.
I agree. I mean, I'm so excited for the individual creators everywhere that just had no shot prior. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah.
Everyone should have a shot,
Yeah, how many Quentin Tarantinos are out there that like just didn't have the right network? They're bad at networking because they're an introvert. Like, there's, just think of that sort of thing. How many Monets, do you have that have been creating art and nobody sees? Now I think that
There's
this gives them the
way
ability
more.
to help them. Right? And even then, it's like they could just not be using. You have to look at it from the perspective like we're not just talking about using AI from the creative process, but it's also helping them market, helping them do all the other business stuff that they don't want to do or they don't want to touch. And so you can have a one man show that's the photographer, director, editor, and he's using tools to help streamline that process. But he's using a real camera and he's using those sorts of things. And he's helping to apply to all these film festivals. And but he's using AI to do that instead of like taking the time to do those. So it's not just the creative process, all the big business, the behemoth Hollywood business behind it, that it could work from this as well.
100%. 100%.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'd love to touch on how you've used AI as a creative partner on larger projects and like how you think it's helped open, if you have a couple of stories of how it's opened the door for Untold Stories for you, maybe to get like as a little motivation for folks out there.
Sure. Yeah. My first project was a personal project. I was in a program and it was a month-long thing. And they were like, all right, you're going to make a personal AI project with mentorship. And so I made a Gen AI documentary about my great 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 grandfather. My
Awesome.
dad had done some research about my family, and I identified this interesting dude in our family history. He was a barrel maker. He lived near us in Salem, Massachusetts, all through the 1800s, and he had 4 kids just like me, and was worried about the steam engine running over his barrel making business, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of interesting stuff going on in that area at the time. So I made this little 2-minute Gen AI piece with early Midjourney and a couple of those tools. And that got a great response. I think people were really interested to see something that early being made end to end with a story. It was very Ken Burnsy. So it was like, it was clearly not historically accurate. And yet it was lending additional value as a story, even as the imagery, because it was all, none of it was real, and
Mm-hmm.
yet it was based on reality. And so like the historical society saw it and thought it was cool, and like my dad who gathered all the material, and it's my family, so I was like, is he gonna hate this, and he thought it was awesome. So it passed a lot of like authenticity tests, which I thought was cool. And then I made another piece about the very first artist, the person who put the first handprint on the cave wall in Indonesia 40,000 years ago. My kids were reading about this time in history, and I was like, imagine that first person. They're in this cave, and there's like a saber-toothed tiger outside, and it's like beautiful jungle, but dangerous as hell. And like, you're the first person to put a figurative piece of art on the wall. Like, that's the coolest thing. And I could tell that story now in first person. So I made that. It was called The First Artist. You can see it on my website if you like. And it's this little journey. I learned, just like with the first one, I wound up learning a lot about history through these projects. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
a big history buff, but it was like so cool to learn about how they like sourced this red ochre rock to make the powder and the paint and like infuse all these different references and stuff. And then yeah, from there, it's just been imagining all kinds of things. My favorite things to make are things that were previously impossible, whether it's a time and place that you can't access anymore, or for whatever reason, the imagery doesn't exist. I think that's a cool space to be in, because it's like, well, it couldn't have been made otherwise. So yeah, I've been doing some client work and stuff, and yeah, just having fun. Like a whole March Madness mascots thing, and you know,
Awesome.
um, yeah,
I love that fusion of history and telling untold stories. Like one of my favorite things. Yeah, there's a lot of dramatizations of history that's come on with the rise of the streaming world, right? The History Channel did some of this stuff in the past, but it's not 100% accurate, but it still brings eyes to those stories for people to go like. There's Google Trends will show like the Wikipedia articles will get more views, the actual historical YouTube videos will get more views. So it's good to bring that like forefront to the forefront, and it's a great way to visually tell stories. I just think kids sitting in history, I loved history, so it was really hard for me to understand people not loving history. But like the kids that hate history are just like, that's in the past, what do I care about? Like now you can visually pull them in. Like there's something that if you're a teacher out there, use these tools and I already know a lot of teachers are, and that's amazing. They're one of the early embracers, the education aspect. Use these because they're already working on all the shoestring budgets and timelines and those things. And so that's fantastic that you've used these tools. I've got some things from my family tree I need to go back, and you've given me scratched an itch for me. Maybe I need to go just build one for mine, because my family has quite a unique story too. So that's fantastic. The way I vision this too is like, if you have kids, had past guests said like, yeah, as part of their bedtime story, we'll just let them talk to ChatGPT about the universe or whatever. It's like, maybe come up with like, bring your kids' stories to life. Like, I can't even imagine, like, you have those possibilities now, and it's just something you do with your family.
Yeah.
It's just crazy, that the possibilities we have. I just love technology, just bringing all these ideas to life.
It's so much fun. I definitely do the bedtime stuff with the kids, and like, you can get really imaginative. Like, you know, all right, we're going to talk to ChatGPT as if ChatGPT is this character that is lived through every historical moment in first person. Like, and we're going to talk to them about what it was like to be there at that moment in time. Like, just fun stuff like that, you know?
That's awesome.
Love it. Love it. And I think, to your point about the learning with the visuals, like, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but I think there's probably a million visual learners like myself
Mm-hmm.
that would have unlocked a lot of other subjects had I been taught visually,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And this is a great tool for that.
Yeah, especially, as we have more and more kids being, diagnosed with learning disabilities and or on the spectrum and those sorts of things. Like, my big complaint about the education world is like, we still teach kids like we have since the 1860s. It's reading, writing, arithmetic. And I think we need to completely flip that upside down. I think the beauty of these tools is you're able to cater a learning path specific to that individual child's needs by adding context, by saying this is their strengths, this is their weaknesses, help bring them up to speed. I just can't wait to see what, because teachers are some of the most passionate people I've ever met in my life, the things that they come up with over the next 5 or 10 years to help kids reach for the stars. Because that was some of the moments in my life. You see all the NASA stuff behind me because I'm from Houston, and like the Challenger explosion was like a similar moment in my life. It was because I was in second grade and my teacher is one of the finalists. And so we're watching it. And I'm in second grade as like an 8-year-old. And so we went down a rabbit hole of like understanding the true cost of the space race and all the sorts of things, what led to that point. And it was one of the similar moments in my life. And like, I refer back to it all the time. And I just hope other kids are having those same type of moments with these crazy things happening in the world. So it's cool that we have these tools to help share those stories.
Absolutely.
So you've talked about some of these things that you've mentioned a couple of tools and things, but for someone who's just getting started, who doesn't really know what, maybe they're working on some internal video for their company, or they're working on something for a family project or a personal project, what are just some approachable steps that they can take, and maybe even a couple of tools that they can utilize, maybe outline what that like workflow kind of looks like just to get started?
I can't say enough about plain old ChatGPT. I really think starting with whatever your biggest challenge is, whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're passionate about, or your hobby is, or your startup is, or whatever, like, that's where you should start. And start with your favorite LLM. Mine is ChatGPT, and build a relationship where ChatGPT knows a whole lot about that challenge of yours or that interest of yours or whatever. And just like fill it in with all the context that you have right up front. I'm working on this thing. I'm thinking about this thing. Here's all the context that I have about this thing. Help me, you know, in better words than that, help me think about this. My strategic thought partner the whole time, set up projects in there and have sort of evergreen conversations you can revisit about the important things in your life. And you'll find that your decision making will just improve. You'll get faster at stuff. Your projects will be elevated. And I think that's really where it's best, is when you pair it with your own subject matter expertise or passion, just really looking at like, what am I trying to do and what tools can help me? Where along the process can they help me? How can they help me? And then just jumping in, because everything is brand new. So there's some experts out there you can find, but for the most part, it all arrived for us at the same time, 2.5 years ago. And you have to just jump in and start to tinker. And that's why I think just kind of keep it close. Like, just whatever you're already working on, bring it into that. And Dolly, the image generator, if you want to get into my world a little bit more, is becoming more and more of a professional tool every day. So if you're interested in the image generation side, start there. Even the realistic stuff is getting better, and it's nice to be able to have a conversation with your image generator. Like, I'm kind of envisioning it this way. Oh, that's good, but let's make some changes. It does pretty well with that. Let's make it widescreen. Let's make it realistic. You can download it, and then if you want to get more serious about it, there are other platforms that do it a bit better. Or, you might want to pull in and use like an image to video generator. I wouldn't recommend Sora. It's a little bit weird still. I like Kling 2.1 the best, but there's a bunch, there's a whole bunch. You can get into Free Pick with a K and they have all the models, or Flora is a whole different approach. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and for those that are listening and I can't keep track of all these things, we will have links to everything that Eric mentions in our newsletter, along with all his links and all references that we talk about, including the stories I referenced earlier, the news stories on our newsletter. So just search Start Small, Think Big on LinkedIn, or just go to linktree.com/digitalmeld, and that's the top link on there. And you'll have access to all of this. It comes out the following Monday, so this will come out Friday, and it'll come out Monday. The podcast for this week, I think there were like 30 reference links, because it's hard to keep track of everything. And what I would suggest, and what I would think Eric would suggest, just try them all, and then whatever works best within your context, within your workflow, roll with that one, because you want to remove as many barriers as possible to keep those creative juices flowing. Whatever's easiest for you to use. So like, I think we overthink what tools to use and things. It's like, shut up and build is what I like to say. So I think that's the cool thing. And the tools are going to be changing all the time. So what you're building with today, keep track. I would say document your context, document what your prompts are, get a OneNote or Evernote or some other tool to just keep track of everything you're using. So whenever that new tool comes out, you're just copying and pasting or exporting your ChatGPT chat to there to utilize those same tools.
Having good documentation is a really good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Getting your documentation in order, like what are your core documents, is a good first session. Like, are there 10 documents you reference a lot? Maybe you can bake them in.
Yeah, and the beauty is, if you especially if you're a writer. I have thousands of blog posts I've written in the past, but they're all mostly technology based. So I've trained my ChatGPT to write like me, like it writes my tone and my dialect, and like I'm pretty verbose, so it's pretty verbose. So just know that it can. You add that more context you give it, and you could say, hey, write like me. Here's a couple of blog posts by me. Here's a couple of papers I wrote whenever I was in college or whatever, and it'll try to match your tone and dialect. And just keep that in mind, that you want it to sound like yourself. And I always do the first pass, and I'm thinking Eric that probably does the same thing, and then you go verify and clean up and add. It's a rough draft. We always say that GPTs and LLMs are about 70% accurate. I'd say don't trust but verify always. So that's the main thing but use those tools to get started. Like, just so many of us are analysis paralysis, right? Especially in the creative space, imposter syndrome. I'm going to be a fraud, or people are not going to like it. But the best thing that can be said is you finish something, whether it sucks or not. You at least finish something. You finish your first draft. You finish something. And I get this with like business ideas and things too. So you're not alone. Just use these tools.
I agree. I think it's just start with your project. What does your project need to get to the finish line?
Yep.
And then go from there.
Yeah, and so I guess we're kind of reaching the end here. So the last section, I think, is education curriculum and demand generation. How teaching AI usage can drive business and community impact. And so, like, you do community outreach, you do work business to business, but what would you say to like business leaders and decision makers at nonprofits and things, how they should help embrace and then skill up their workforces to maybe drive that adoption and see those results?
Yeah, I think you touched on it a little earlier when you were talking about learning. I think for our business leaders, learning is like the job now, and you really have to get in there and try it. Like, I've heard a lot people say, they got the mandate from above, like, we got to get into the AI business, and they don't even know what that means. I think you gotta get your hands in there, get used to an LLM, and educate yourself as much as possible on an ongoing basis. And then I think it's a matter of not looking at AI like this huge thing that you have to learn all of, really trying to filter it down to what applies just to you, because there's so much. It's such a fire hose that presents this paralysis you were talking about, where it's like, I can't possibly learn all that. It's too much, that's why I just try to get people to like, try to block that out.
Mm-hmm.
And just like, what job do you have to do? And let's look at where AI can help, because there's 8 million things to get distracted by. even in my lane of video, I could look at like 25 platforms a day. There's 85 newsletters every day that come out that tell me about the new great thing. But I have a project. I have a specific project that I need to get done in a specific frame of time. And so how can AI help me with that one? And then the next one, you know what I mean? I think that that can at least turn that fire hose into something more manageable to sip from.
Yeah, once the creative juices are flowing, that's the thing is once you get comfortable with these tools, you're going to come up with so many ideas you never even would have thought of because you didn't know the possibilities. And once you understand the possibilities and the limitations, there are limitations, obviously. It's not all perfect, but I say we're SpaceX, not Boeing, right? We're going to blow up some rockets, but we're still going to make it to Mars eventually, and we're going to get there a lot faster than most other people. And as long as you're learning from everything, also be able to pivot. That's the most important thing too. And I think a lot of people in the creative space already know this, but whenever you start writing a story or start on a project, it ends up in a completely different place than you had originally envisioned. It's very, very few times is there someone who's like, this is what I'm going to make, and it's going to be this exactly. I think because you get other people involved, and there's other inputs, and you, like you said, you're empathetic to what those needs and concerns are, and it's communicative. Don't do this in a vacuum. I would say too, like get feedback from other people, ask them how they would have done something differently, or bring them into your project, and you're no longer a solo person. It's someone to keep you motivated. It's like having a weightlifting buddy, right? It's easier to go to the gym every day if someone's there to hold you accountable.
Absolutely. And stop being shy about your usage. I don't, I think people are crazy not to be using it. So anyone treating you like a dummy for saying you use it doesn't get it.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those things that people who are anti. I understand all of the geopolitical aspects of it, the power, like all of those. We're going to have maybe we'll have to have universal basic income come or something like that. Those are problems that need to be solved 10 years down the line. That's not something that needs to be solved now and for you. So don't let that be a barrier of entry for you now. Would be my recommendation. That once we get closer to having those actual issues, we'll have the technology and the openness of resources and freedom of resources because time has been saved using these tools to actually tackle those problems is what I would say. We can all come up with excuses, right? It's just at the end of the day, it's just use these tools to find out more. And if you are skeptical, use the tools to be skeptical about those tools. Ask those tools like what are some downfalls? And they're trained on human data, so whatever they're trained on, they're going to give you those results. That's the key too. Is just be cognizant of that. And now, so I think wrapping up, what maybe take us through one of your like workflows or a use case that you've taken through. So people like, why would I need someone like Eric? What is something that they could do for my business? Maybe just take us through like what that creative process looks back like and what that end product.
Sure. So in a lot of cases with me and the Gen AI work, it's companies saying we maybe have some assets, but we want more or cooler ones, or we don't really have a lot of assets and we need you to sort of make that world of assets. So like I worked with this crypto brand that didn't really have their aesthetic built out. They had some ideas of it. It was ancient Greece meets 300 years in the future, and they had this purple orb. And so they weren't going to be able to go shoot anything fantastical like this, but I was able to generate these worlds that, they look like a major film set. And that's where I show the example that I took a photo from the cover of Vanity Fair from Annie Leibovitz of the Game of Thrones cast on this rocky mountain outpost. And they're all there together. So I pulled that in as a style reference and made this world based on that of like these clans out there on the mountains with these orbs and stuff. And like, there was no way that this was getting made because of the budget it would have required. And yet now they're able to do this and develop a visual identity very quickly. And then we could make a custom image model out of all the imagery that I made so that we could start to print that look on demand for social after that. And that's a kind of a common type of a thing. Like I'm working with this video game company and they have sort of these like pixely 2D graphics and they want like cinematic scenes made out of their characters. And I can do that on a budget that if they wanted to do that with actors and props and sets, that would be out of reach. And yet I can take these zombie characters and I can make them look more realistic and put them into real scenes and try to build little dramatic scenes with them and stuff. And so that's what we're doing. So it's a lot of like a content enhancement, I guess I would say, where there just wouldn't have been able to be any, and now there can be.
And is that an iterative process where you come back and like, do you like this? Do you like this? Is this what you like a normal creative process, or is it more like they just trust you and then you come back with a full vision, or is it more like that hands-on approach?
That's a good question. I try to talk with my clients a lot about that because it's new space and the technology is
Mm-hmm.
limited and changing all the time. And so I try to be really transparent that like you will have to trust me a little bit more so than you might be used to, especially if we're just starting to work together. But AI is going to give you a lot of unexpected results that you want someone who can see that some of that's usable and should be used and might alter the creative a little or a lot. But I would say it's probably most like and I'm not an animator, so I could be wrong about this, but I would suspect that my workflow most resembles an animation workflow now, where I'm trying to lock in a set of still imagery
Mm-hmm.
with the client that they can see this imagery and sign off on it at different like levels of aesthetic development. And so we're locking in like characters and props and compositions and things like that, so that like if we make a video from this image, you're happy. I know you signed off on the image, so like you know when we stitch these 15 images together as videos, I know you're going to be happy, like that kind of thing.
That's awesome. So that makes sense. You're saying like a tone board or vision board. Like this is the visual tone we're going for. This is what we're trying to what we're trying to portray. And then once you have that, you can fill in the gaps and things. That's great to know. And I'm really glad you brought up that like this is an unknown area, because we have this conversation with folks all the time, and they ask us like, what's the ROI going to be? Until we actually start doing it and we understand the context that you're going to provide, your secret sauce is what we call it, that 30% of the process that's unique to them. We don't really know what the outcome is going to be. So there's going to have to be that level of trust, because it is the unknown. We don't have decades of case studies to show like this is exactly what you put this input in, this is the output you get. Like, and then it's just changing too, because we put this input in last week and it's a different version of the model. It's going to be a different output next week. So it's more about, like you said, you have that working relationship and say, okay, I trust that they have my best interest at heart and they're going to do what's best for you. And then for us, it's our job to empathize with their needs and try to, I always say, talk to the people closest to the problem you're trying to solve, and get those insights that, again, most of the time leadership doesn't really understand the problems that you're trying to solve. The leadership may not understand what the marketing team actually wants. So hopefully you're talking to the marketing when you're developing solutions for that marketing team. So I'm glad you brought that up too. I think that's a really important context.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think with the previs stuff, it's great. You can really quickly help clients visualize ideas and versions of them. Here's 3 different versions of the look, really quickly. That kind of stuff is super valuable, even if you were going to go shoot it all with cameras after that.
So folks that know previs is pre-visualization. So think of storyboards as the old school. They would write a storyboard out before they actually go shoot the films. They would have their set list and shot list. And now they can do all that digitally and actually make storyboards in motion. And so they can actually get a previs of what it will look like in animation. And now it's just getting easier and easier with these AI tools to do that. And so you can pre-visualize this stuff. So yeah, that's a great thing to bring up too, that you can help get the juices churning, and they don't really know until they see it. And it's really hard to sometimes with AI to show them results right away. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely nice with the image generation stuff. You can do spec work really quickly. You can spin up ideas really quickly. You could pitch clients with finished commercials. Like, there's such a different speed of it now. And yeah, I'm not sure why I brought that up, but
No, I think that's really important. I think it's important to have that. It's the agility, and again, that's what's key to the people being able to punch above their weight class. Right? Is you're a little faster, you're a little more nimble, and I think that's the key. Is it gives you all these tools give the ability between AI and automation together to be more nimble, to free up the time to do the stuff that really matters and focus on the things that are really important. Like honing in on like the way I look at it from a telling a story is like you don't have to worry about the visualizations once you have the spec board, so you can focus in on like making the story really good, making if you hire actors or voice actors, making sure that they're honed and prepared and things. And so just think of all the things in a production that you wish you had more time for. And much like in medium and small businesses, you're putting out fires all day instead of like focusing on the actual driving the ship forward. So awesome. Well, thanks again for joining. I think we have a couple more things I like to do. Just a quick lightning round of questions. What's your favorite tool from the past month that you've used?
Flora.
Flora. Okay, so Flora is a favorite tool of the past month. Is there any, 1 or 2 sentences you can say about why you love it so much?
Think of it like a storyboard that's also an image generator,
Awesome.
with lots of models to choose from, image generation models. So like you can put all your pictures up there, but then you can also you can just drag one line to the other picture and it'll make a combination of the two pictures.
Wow.
Or you can like give it a little text prompt in addition to dragging the image over. So it's like a bunch of little image nodes, and you can just make more looking at them all, like as if they were like pictures stuck on a whiteboard. But you could also like just generate pictures on that
Yeah,
white.
yeah,
Yeah,
like it's a no code workflow, right? Like I like this one, I like this one. Let's combine it. Like
yeah,
let's see what
yeah.
those you're mating the Tamagotchis or whatever they were back in the day, the kids' toys. That's awesome. I will definitely check that one out. I haven't checked that one out yet. So, can you name like one AI use case that more people should try that maybe is not known right away?
An AI use case more people should try. I think anywhere where like a deep understanding of a topic would be beneficial. Try deep research. Try going to ChatGPT and working on the prompt first. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, ChatGPT, I want to deeply understand this subject matter, and I need a super prompt to feed to deep research to then go and conduct this incredible deep research on this topic I really want to understand. When you start from a super prompt and you take it into deep research specifically, which is within ChatGPT, and you turn on deep research, so you say, that's what I want you to do, it will ask you a few clarifying questions and then leave for like 10 minutes and come back with a report that if it's something you're interested in, it will blow your mind. So I would say do that.
No, that's great insights, and that's something I haven't mentioned before, and I should, because deep research is a fantastic tool, but it does take more credits and it does take more time, so it's not something we generally talk about. But that's it's beautiful. You mentioned first train your model to, hey, I want a perfect prompt for this. Don't waste your time waiting for deep research and then go back and prompt it 17 more times. You want to knock it out of the park from the get go. So, and deep research is fantastic, and most of the big models, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity and things, they'll have these like deep research, deep thinking models. We'll link to all of these in the show notes on our newsletter, so don't think you have to remember all that. And that's a great one. So I'm really impressed with that answer, so thank you for sharing. And then finally, what's the most overhyped concept in AI right now?
Anything that says it's like one click and done for
Yeah.
you is bullshit.
Yeah.
Forgive my language, but that's just not the case yet. It's really not. Especially with the generative AI stuff, it's extremely difficult to do it well. Certainly to do it like to client standards, it's extraordinarily difficult still, very limited. And anyone that says, oh, look, here's the thing that's going to just run over everything, just type in your prompt and you're done. You have this movie, it's perfect. You're miles away from that reality. Anything claiming that is a red flag.
Yeah, glad you brought that up. We call it a turnkey solution. I just had an episode a few episodes ago. It's like AI snake oil. There's a lot of them out there. We just need to point us to your data, and it'll be like the perfect, geologist or something crazy and absurd. It's like, nope. That there's always going to be what makes AI so great is it's personable. It's built on the data and context that you provided that's specific to you or your company or whatever, or your vision, that you're trying to come across. And so again, you've echoed many of the same sentiments we think. So I, again, could be happier with that answer. That's a fantastic and a cautionary tale, right? Don't, if it sounds too good to be true, or probably is. Not saying we won't eventually get there with AGI and those things, but we're a decade away or more from that. So cool. So finally, we have one more segment we like to do called the hot takes. I'll provide you what mine is, and then you can kind of think of one that you would provide. So the businesses that win in the AI era won't be the biggest, they'll be the boldest. Again, the ones that aren't afraid to swing for the fences or reach for the stars. I think those are the ones that come out the biggest. Is there a gamble? A little bit, but as long as you're taking a pragmatic and practical approach and you're doing your due diligence like you would with any other technology tool that you roll out, I don't think there's really all that much risk. As long as you do your due diligence before and you don't throw ethics out the window and those things, I think you're probably in pretty good shape. Eric, what about you?
Let's see. I mean, okay. One thing that I've been kind of thinking about is that we might be the only, I don't even want to say generation because it might not be that long, but we might be the only group of people that gets to take advantage of the AI opportunity. I don't know if that's true, but I say it because I don't know how long the opportunities will exist before it's going too fast for anyone to catch in any kind of business profit way. But like the next 10 years to me seem like the most unprecedented opportunity for revenue generation for those who can catch this wave. It's just such a big, powerful wave that if you figure out a way to ride it, it's going to shoot you so far forward that it'll change your life. But eventually that wave will like crash, if you want to follow the analogy. And then, we all have the benefit of like training all our chat GPT for years right now. Like, what about the people that come up 10 years behind us? And we've been doing that for 10 years longer than them. Like, and that kind of thing. I just think that we, as the people who are old enough right now to take advantage with business, are like, in unprecedented territory now and maybe in the future, like this moment.
Agreed, 100%. So another take. You've been knocking them out of the park all episode, but like, because again, we're in the sixth wave of innovation right now. So thinking about the previous like air flight and microprocessors and stuff. So we're in the sixth wave of innovation. The seventh wave of innovation is going to be so mind-bogglingly complex and fast. And each wave of innovation is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So last wave of innovation was about 35, 40 years. And this innovate, the sixth wave is going to be 20 and 25 years. And the seventh wave, once we get to that AGI or that next wave, like who knows how quickly that's going to go. And it's just going to accelerate faster and faster and faster. And if you get on that ground floor now, you build your foundation now, your knowledge foundation now, and embrace the unknown and just think that like, hey, it's okay that I don't know the answers, but I'm going to figure it out. Have faith in your ability to figure things out. That's the single most important thing a piece of advice I give to everyone moving forward today. Because what you need to learn, you're going to be able to learn a lot quicker than the previous things, unless you're like a doctor doing or a surgeon, or you're a rocket scientist and something like that. But for most business knowledge, you're going to be able to figure it out on the fly as long as you give yourself the ability to faith in your ability to figure things out. And so that's, again, great takes.
Yeah, following your instincts is a great take too.
And just know that if you fail, that's great. You just put that into your prompt and say, I failed at that. Like, let's try it again. And you can help you iterate faster. So failure is not an option, is what I'd say. So Eric, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast and bringing your unique perspective that we don't normally come across in the B2B space. I certainly see, being as part of the corporate world, that there are video production units in large organizations, small organizations. The big thing, like you said, the dentist office being able to revolutionize their business overnight because of one generative AI thing they did. I'm going to leave this floor open for the last 2 or 3 minutes to you. Tell about how people can get a hold of you and anything you want to share.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I have a portfolio site for all my AI work going now. It's cgacreative.com. Those are the initials of my kids, all of them, CGA. So you can check out my video work there and all the GPT stuff and everything. And I'm also active on a pretty daily basis on LinkedIn. And so if anyone wants to reach me there, it's a great way to reach out, either there or their website, and say hello. And I'm pretty good about responding back. So, if anyone wants to reach out and chat, I'd be happy to.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And again, we'll have links to all this stuff in the show notes, and then our newsletter as well. So it shouldn't be too hard to figure out how you can get a hold of Eric. I would recommend that if this is a space you care about, reach out to him. I'm sure he'd be happy to hop on a Zoom call or Teams call or something for 20 or 30 minutes and shoot ideas with you and let you know, give you some ideas for the roadmap. He's been fantastic to me. Been fantastic to work with. So I think he's an evangelist like I am. We know the more people know about AI, the more you're going to need us, or the better it's going to be for all of us, because we're helping to train the models faster and become better with it. So, thanks again for joining us for this latest episode. I would say just have faith in your ability to figure things out. And until next week, go forth. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Brad.
We want to hear about your AI and automation journey, and we'd love for you to get involved with Start Small, Think Big. If you'd like to participate or offer feedback, please reach out to us anytime via email at contact@digitalmeld.io, or use the contact form on our website, digitalmeld.io/contact. Also, please help spread the word by liking, subscribing, and sharing our podcasts on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks.